There are endless possibilities here. Some nails, a piece of wood, a hammer, if you have one, if you add the right measurements, and a person with a plan, a person who has the capability and the aptitude, the possibilities are endless. Building something is something I've always respected, probably because I don't really have the skills to pull it off. Now, there's some things I can do really well, but I don't have that uncanny ability to identify a problem and use my hands and my skill and my creativity and my artistry to develop a solution. Now, there's people who can do this really well, and we call those people craftsmen. And craftsmen are really important. In fact, they're critical to humanity. They're critical to the advancement of civilization. I think you'll find craftsmen at the crossroads to human history. You'll see craftsmen responsible for glorious achievements like the Roman Colosseum or maybe the Vatican. Craftsmen are responsible for many, many other famous landmarks. But sometimes a craftsman goes unnoticed. A craftsman goes unknown. A craftsman remains anonymous, and this was the case with a carpenter from Bethlehem. An unknown carpenter who lived 2,000 years ago. It's not the carpenter you're thinking about. This carpenter would have been known by his peers as a craftsman, and like many other people who lived in the day, he would have had animals, because without animals you couldn't eat. Because if you didn't farm, you didn't have any food. And if you didn't have animals, you couldn't farm. But now animals, they have to eat. And so this craftsman, his name was probably John or Simeon or Lazarus or Joshua. He needed to design something to solve this problem using creativity and artistry. So using his hands and using his tools, a hammer and nails and wood, he created a simple device. A device to feed animals. And of course, we call that device a manger. Now, there was another craftsman. He would be a citizen of the Roman Empire, but he had a different problem. Because the mighty Roman Empire was under constant threat of rebellion. You see, these Jewish people who the Romans were ruling over had a tenacity, and they were zealous, and they wouldn't submit to the power of Rome. So this craftsman was tasked with designing a mechanism that would serve as a tool for extreme punishment. Extreme punishment while making a spectacular example of what happened to people who dare rebel against the Roman Empire. And this craftsman's name was probably Cornelius or Flavius or Julian or Claudius. He set out to solve this problem using his creativity and his artistry. And using his hands, using tools, using a hammer and a nail, he created a device. A device to punish and repress. And of course, we call it a cross. There was also a third craftsman. Unlike the other craftsmen, he was a creator without equal. And his names are many. Yahweh, the self-existent one. Elohim, the God of majesty. El Shaddai, God Almighty, or the all-sufficient. And his tools are omnipotence, omniscience, omnipresence, unlimited power, unlimited knowledge, unlimited creativity. And to his name, we credit Grand Canyons and deep oceans and the beating of newborn babies' hearts, color and light. Light. He spoke it into existence out of his will. And he separated light from darkness, but the darkness has an enticing appeal. And so the craftsman's people chose darkness over the love of the craftsman. And this caused a great divide, a great chasm, a great separation between the craftsman and his people, between God and us. Now the distance broke the craftsman's heart because this craftsman feels personally, knows intimately the hopelessness, the burden, the distance between he and the ones he loves. Now, our craftsman is not one to observe in silence or settle in to inactivity. You see, our craftsman is a pursuer. He is a restorer. He is a redeemer. And so our craftsman develops a plan. A plan to send new light. New light. Now his tools are not hammer and nails. His tools are the elements, protons and neutrons and electrons and the busy atoms that construct hammer and nails. The busy atoms that create proteins, and the proteins that build cells, and the cells that build flesh, and the flesh to take on the divine. A divine child, God in human flesh. A child that we call Jesus. Now, a lesser craftsman would use common tools. Tools available to other craftsmen, but the master craftsman wants his work to be known as unmistakably his. The master craftsman wants his work to evoke praise and bewilderment and joy and astonishment. So he uses resources overlooked by other craftsmen. He uses tools that are scoffed at and scorned at by other craftsmen. A baby, shepherds, the poor, an overlooked town, an overlooked people, and even more surprisingly, even more puzzling or paradoxical, is that he uses the handiwork of the carpenter, the manger. And of course, he uses the handiwork of the executioner, the cross. The manger and the cross, one insignificant, the other terrifying. One to support life and to nourish life, the other to end life and to inflict suffering. One would be the first place where our Savior would rest. The other would be the last place our Savior would rest. And the manger would send him. Send the baby who would grow into a holy man. A teacher with exceptional brilliance. A pastor with uncommon vision. A miracle worker with unlimited power. A prophet who would say as he stood up to read in the sanctuary, "The Spirit of the Lord is on me because he has anointed me to proclaim good news to the poor. He has sent me to proclaim freedom for the prisoners and recovery of sight for the blind, to set the oppressed free." Just as the manger would send him, the cross would receive him. A suffering servant, a man of sorrows, the bearer of burdens, the humble king, the innocent victim who would say, "Father, forgive them. They don't know what they are doing. Abba, they don't know." The tools of the craftsman, a manger and a cross. A manger and a cross. The manger symbolic of hope in the midst of new things. New life in the midst of uncertainty. treasure in the midst of poverty. And the cross is symbolic of God's presence in destruction, his love in the power of suffering, his light, presence in the darkness. Wood and nails, the manger and the cross, together, they remind us that we are more lost, more flawed, more hopeless than what we could ever imagine. Yet we are more loved and more treasured than we can ever have the audacity to hope for. And these simple objects, the manger and the cross, we can see that God can restore even the most broken parts of our world. That he is working and advocating for us. That this craftsman extends to our deepest hurts. His creativity sees past the limits that we set. That he can use ordinary things and even terrifying things to astonish us and take our breath away. But what's most thrilling is that he invites us into the story. See, the Christmas narrative is the story of the craftsman using flawed people, and here we sit. Flawed people. Now we are removed from the story because the events have already occurred. Yet we are submersed in the story because its impact reverberates across time and it transcends culture. And while we are not the first to witness the light and the hope of the manger still sends us out. It sends us out in hope to be bearers of good news. It sends us out in love, knowing that the cross is still receiving the hopelessness of humanity. In the manger there is hope. In the cross there is grace. And we are the messengers. We are the messengers who get to shine light into the world. As we light these candles, we light them as a symbol of the craftsman's love for you. Let them be a reminder of when we were in darkness, the craftsman sending light into the world. The people who walk in darkness will see a great light. For those who live in the land of deep darkness, a light will shine. So let these lights be a symbol that light and love casts out all fear and all darkness. And a reminder that Christmas is not merely a celebration of what the craftsman has done. It's not just a reminder of his tools or his creativity. It is a calling. A calling for us to illuminate. A calling for us to illuminate this light that we have. This mighty, joyful, passionate love that lives inside of us. It's a symbol for us to illuminate and tell the world and show the world in our love that the light has come. The light has come to live among us.